My name is Ron. I'm an alcoholic, and I'd like to welcome you all here. We are in the final leg, the second from final leg, that's right. We're on step 10 and 11, spiritual growth. They will be split between Peter M. and Chris S. Pete's going to come up here first, so please help us welcome Pete. And got a half hour.
I'm Peter, recovered alcoholic, and thank all the speakers so far. Guys are doing a great job, and thank all of you for hanging in there. And we'll get to talk a little bit of our experience on 10 and 11, but if you just allow me a little latitude for a moment. November 11th, there's a woman sitting here, Marion W., who made 28 years sobriety, so I just want to give her a point. Just a heck of a guy. And I'm humble too. My experience has been that I can't enter the world of the Spirit truly unless I've done the work in 1 through 9, which brings death to self-will and awakens the Spirit. And I find that there's spiritual virtue comes from following directions. And so if I've been thorough in 1 through 9, it's okay. And I'm working on cleaning up amends. Although the amends may not be completely done, but I'm seeking. I'm looking to make amends to these folks. I'm not just kind of letting them sit there. I can enter the world of the Spirit. Our book says this thought brings us to step 10. And so we have to take a look at, lots of times folks tell me, I'm struggling with inventory, I'm struggling with prayer meditation, I'm struggling in practicing these principles because my illness has gone underground and now resurfacing in other areas, in sprees, sex sprees, food sprees, money sprees, fear sprees, things like that. And I always ask them, where are we with amends? What outstanding amends do you have that you haven't made yet? And very often it's amends that they could be making that they haven't made, but things got comfortable, life got good, so they don't feel the sense of urgency to complete the amends that they could be making without causing more harm. And then what happens is the delusional mind takes over, the ego takes over, and convinces me I've entered the world of the Spirit when I haven't. I'm at its doorstep, but I haven't really crossed over. Conversely, if I'm out there trying to make amends and I'm seeking people, even though I haven't made contact with them, and the ones that I know would cause more harm in so doing, if the things were different, I would be making amends. It seems like as we clean up the wreckage of our past, we slide into this world of the Spirit. We've entered the world of the Spirit. And step 10, really interesting, it tells me I've entered the world of the Spirit, but it doesn't tell me I have free room and board, that there's things to do. And it's about continuing taking my own inventory. And what am I doing to grow in understanding and effectiveness? Clearing up any wreckage that I cause. Discussing it with someone immediately. I've always worked with immediately folks. If something hooks me at 9 o'clock in the morning, who am I going to discuss this with after I make prayer? Because that's the first move. Everything goes through God. Who am I discussing it with if I can't locate my sponsor? Sometimes I can locate my sponsor. Am I writing inventory on any of these things? Am I willing to make amends and set right the wrongs I've caused? Now, I don't have to do this. But when I don't do things like that, what happens is I begin to get plaque on the soul. And little by slowly, I start to go dark. And it won't be immediate, but it will be a little at a time where I'll find myself standing in the middle of nowhere wondering how I got here. Because I won't only die from one, gunshot wound. I will bleed out from 1,000 cuts right in Alcoholics Anonymous. Making 5 and 10 and 20 and 30 years sober, but wondering how come the wheels are off the bus. What am I doing wrong? Is my life one of resistance or acceptance, disease and discomfort, or peace, and comfort? Am I in this for compliance, or am I in a place of surrender? Is this spiritual life or spiritual death for me? Am I doing just abstinent-based recovery, where I just don't go, I go to meetings and don't drink, and the wheels are off the bus? If you're a real alcoholic, good luck with that one. Or am I in a place of complete surrender, surrendering to this power, surrendering to the direction of a sponsor, even though I don't even believe the information they're giving me, but it has to be better than what I have come up with, because at this point I'm convinced of myself, I am nothing, the Father doeth the works. My step 10 is about what I'm doing through the day, navigating through the day. Something happens in step 10. Can you get my glasses, please? Thank you. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we'll hear folks say, it's normal to think about a drink if you're an alcoholic. And that's totally true. It's normal to think about a drink if you're an alcoholic, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years sober. That's totally true if you're an untreated alcoholic. But according to my big book, when we're treated, we get to a place called recovered where we're not thinking about alcohol anymore. The very thing that was plaguing me was on my back suddenly gets removed. And I've ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, almost like it's an afterthought. And those are the 10-step promises, which we don't hear a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous, but it says this: I've ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. So if I'm going through this book for the 5th or 10th time, how do I get that statement to meet me where I currently am if I'm not thinking about alcohol? Who am I wrestling with? Who am I fighting with? Who am I struggling with up in the head? You know, I sit on my couch and the bills are paid, I'm healthy, everything's good, the kids are good, the car is good, the job is good, my health is good, everything's good. And my mind goes, yeah, but remember that time. Remember what they did to you. And then it starts the whole train of drama. And I start to wrestle with folks. Do you ever wake up in the morning, as soon as you open up your eyes, you're right in the middle of an argument you didn't even plan on getting into? Right in the middle of a conversation that stays with you all day long, follows you into your car, follows you to work. And you get up at 5 and by 6:30, you're totally pissed off at everyone, and no one's around. And I'm replaying stuff from a long time ago. I got fear of the future, what's going to happen to me? And I listen to all these voices. Have my first cup of coffee after prayer and meditation. I'm sitting at my table thinking I'm the only one sitting at the table. But I'm not. Because who's sitting at that table is the AA guy, Moses. He's sitting at the table. And next to him is the entrepreneur, the guy who has to make more money. No matter how much money he makes, he's got to make more money. You got the athletic guy who always wants to get in shape. You have the boyfriend guy who wants to be a Romeo all the time and warm and sensitive and fuzzy and all those things. You got the son of my dad who's sitting there. You got the brother of my brothers who's sitting there. You got all these people sitting there. And they're all talking to me all at once, demanding my attention. Each one doesn't know the other one exists. That's why if you ask an alcoholic how you doing, we always say, I'm so tired. You don't have a job. How could you be tired? Because I'm talking to all these people and I'm giving them all my attention. I'm jumping in and out of conversations. I'm going to start working out tomorrow, make money tomorrow. I can't work out because I have to make money, but if I make money, I can't work out. It's my parents' fault. They ruined me. There's another voice that sits at that table, by the way. And that's the voice when he speaks, I go, would you please? I'm busy. That's the godly voice. I don't want to hear that voice right now because I got life to do. And I'm trying to live life on life's terms when I always failed miserably with that. So for me, it's about getting current and staying still. I can't enter the world of the Spirit if I'm not current. And intuitiveness only comes from being current. Current means I'm clear with the men's. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. I have regular contact with my sponsor. Not a sponsor in name only that I call once in a blue moon. And we have a nice little chit-chat and it's over. A sponsor who's holding me accountable, who's allowed me to be consistent. I need to be responsible too. I'm sponsoring other people. I have a home group. I'm attending meetings regularly. I'm living equally on all three sides of the triangle. Chances are, if I'm doing all of that stuff, I've entered the world of the Spirit by the time I get to step 10, and I'm probably not fighting too many people. I'm probably not wrestling with too many thoughts in my head. Oh, it's going to happen. I'm broken. But when they do happen, I know what to do. And if I get hooked at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to go back to prayer, even though I just finished prayer, and ask God for mercy, for forgiveness for someone, and keep moving, chop wood, carry water. And if I owe an amends, I'm going to take care of it that day, not 90 days. And I'll seek out my sponsor or an immediately person. And I usually call them with 4-column inventory ready to be read. Usually. There's been times I've been so hooked with something, I've called my sponsor, felt like I was bleeding out, saying, my sponsor's Mickey Mussett from Denver, Colorado, by the way. I would call him, Mick, I'm jammed up, I don't know what to do, I'm going to kill somebody, can you help me? What's going on? And sometimes you just need a calm, still voice on the other end who's completely objective, who hears what's going on and helps you navigate through that. There's been times where I've called up Mickey, so okay, let's do inventory right now. Who are you resentful with? Why? What do you think that affected where you're at fault? Because it's that critical that we move through it right now. Resentment's the number one offender. No resentment's acceptable. All resentments are unacceptable, so we had to stop the bleeding. And then I throw myself the harder into helping others. Who can I be of service to now? Always work with a drunk. Bill said, we survived a certain trial with low spots ahead by helping others. Help others. Well, I don't feel like it. I'm really angry. Go help somebody. Having a life of service. Big Book uses words like next, commence, at once, now, vigorously, words that imply action, not hang out. And if my focus is just on attending meetings, which is good, then my focus is not on what am I doing to get better, like I have a sponsor who's moving me through this work. It says this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. Did inventory in 4. I'm looking at inventory here. I'm doing a night review. I'm constantly flushing out. The process of recovery has always been about removal of subtraction, never addition. I don't need to acquire stuff. Someone was talking, I think Karen was talking about the hole in the soul earlier. We all come in with that hole in the soul. It's the brokenness. But it's not really empty. What it is full of ideas and contempts and attitudes and belief systems and emotions, my attachments to external things, how I'm supposed to be, the gods I have put before God, and you put that all in here and it feels empty. It doesn't work. And one of the most freeing thing is coming to the realization how flawed I am, that I walk with this stuff and I honor it and I hold on to it and I will fight for it. The realization of that, the aha moment about how broken I am, that of myself I am nothing, the Father doeth the works, and the only power that can remove that stuff is God. I do some mechanics. The same way a farmer does the planting and God does the growing. I do some mechanics, but the mechanics don't keep me sober. I get some clarity, I discuss it with someone, it's a confession. In sharing this with my sponsor, and then it goes back to God, and God is going to do what He wants in His time. And one of the most freeing things I have found is when I'm hooked with that resentment, is immediately going to forgiveness for that person, or perhaps I might owe them an amends. I like the forgiveness either because I hate making amends. You know, you did this to me and I have to come to you to make amends. The ego doesn't like that part. And it's simple. I forgive Joe. And I keep working. I forgive Father, I forgive Joe. I keep working with that. And at some point we begin to get unhooked from it. The narrowing of the road in discipline, there's freedom. How free do I want to be? I love the effect produced by God, so I do this. I get to do this work. Because if I don't do this work and I fall back to just doing abstinence-based recovery, little by slowly you'll be 12-stepping me if I'm lucky. Here's what has happened to me as a result of this work. 2 quick stories. Sitting with my sponsor, Mickey, and doing a 5th step, which led into step 9, which got me completely freer in 10 and 11, only as a result of having a sponsor and doing the work and being part of this fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a Catholic, and I start going to church early in sobriety, and lighting candles for my mom and the sick and suffering. And I'd sometimes go to Mass and sometimes not go to Mass. And when I did go to Mass, I would wonder, how come the priest isn't calling me up there to do the homily? I'm an AA, I can probably do a better job than him. Critiquing the congregation, taking everyone's inventory. If they sang the Lord's Prayer, I didn't like that, I'd critique that, take a note, one demerit, find a new church. And then I got caught up in a lot of the headlines that we all know about with some of these folks. And I use that as wholesale condemnation against the whole movement. Never had a problem with the carpenter, never had a problem with prayer, but I had a problem with the establishment. So I'm going through the work. And I come to institutions. And I read to my sponsor, Resentment Catholic Church, here's the cause, effects, where am I fall? And I read a whole bunch of causes. And I just moved to very matter of fact. And my sponsor said, hold it, which meant I'm now in trouble. Hold it. How long have you had this one for? And I immediately did what most sponsors do, push right back with it, trying to make it justifiable. And he reminded me how resentment was the number one offender. He says, you owe an amends here, don't you? And he gave me instructions. When I got to my 8-step list and eventually to 9, what I was supposed to do was go back to my local church. And there's something called confession. I was supposed to go in there in a confession and share this with the priest. My gossiping, my slandering, and all that, my taking inventory. And that's just what I did. And he gave me absolution. I said, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I told him what I've been doing. He gave me absolution. What can I do to make this right? And he said one thing. He said, he understood, by the way, it was a very unorthodox confession, as God would have it. Usually I don't talk too much. He gave me a little feedback. He understood, I understand. What can I do to make it right? He says, can you come to Mass tomorrow? I said, okay, I'll do that. And so I went with Marion that Sunday morning to 10:30 Mass. And the long and short of it is, when I walked in, I began to weep when the bells went off. I'm sitting there feeling like I'm home. They closed with the Lord's Prayer, and everyone held hands like we do here. And I'm trying to fight back the tears. And I left. And when I walked out of Mass after it was all over, I felt like this door that was locked had been finally opened. As light as a feather, where in the world like a loose garment. I remember calling my sponsor like a little kid on Christmas morning, got all the toys he wanted. And my sponsor says, isn't it great to be free? And what has happened to me out of this work, if I'm not on the road, you will find me serving 10:30 Mass because I'm a lector and a Eucharistic minister at my church. That's no big deal for some. For me, it's a huge deal. And I totally get it. I totally get all of it. That there were a few bad apples, and I used those bad apples for wholesale condemnation. I would have never been able to see that if I didn't go through this work. And I bring that up because what happened to me for 10 and 11, it blew the doors off of growing in understanding and effectiveness. The power of prayer now has changed. The power in meditation, going into darkness to see and silence to hear. What happens? The communing, the intimacy with prayer and meditation. There was a time in prayer and meditation where we have to read lots of books. The 24-hour day book, as Bill C. I'd read a page out of everything. I was becoming neurotic and attached to all that stuff. I'd leave my house and run back because I forgot a page. I'm not spiritual, I got to do that. And I became attached to all of it. I read nothing now. It's just me and God. And I had sage and candles and chimes and gongs and tapes. It looked like a recording studio at my altar. You know, it looked like a head shop, really. Had more stuff go, bang this, burn that, turn this thing. I'm trying to convince myself I'm spiritual. I have all that stuff. I built an altar. I have this little altar. And bring dignity to the practice. Meditation mat. And I have pictures that are near and dear to me, things that are close to me. A picture of a cathedral up above it, my God there, some Eastern stuff on the side. It's a place. But not attached to that, not worshiping idols, but worshiping what they represent. And not trying to glorify God in an AA meeting when I'm really looking to glorify me. And what can happen, and it happened to me, is I get attached. The mind doesn't like when it feels idle, like there's nothing to do. And sometimes in prayer and meditation, we will hit a desert where there's nothing happening in meditation. There's nothing happening in prayer. It almost feels like it's really dry. And it's an effort to get in there and pray. And it's effort to get into meditation. And I'd rather not do it, but I'm trying to do it because I'm so damn spiritual. I'm going to, tough it out. And what I do is because the mind gets frustrated, it wants to create stuff. So I buy more sage, I buy more candles, I buy more CDs, I buy more stuff. And I start to create God speaking to me images. Oh, this just happened to me now. God's really speaking to me. It's me who's speaking to me because I'm praying to me. I'm worshiping me in my mind and my ego who needs some stuff to do. Trying to convince God that I'm spiritual when He created me. Trying to give God insight into things that I think He doesn't know about. And all the power I've come up with, that I think I've come up with, becomes supreme weakness when I stand before my Creator. And all it does is block me further from God and allows me to go the other way and get things that give me instant gratification. That's what I do on my own. One of the best things I can do is a complete surrender at the altar to my God. On awakening, because the book says on awakening, not after 6 Red Bulls and a carton of cigarettes go, oh. I don't see how many people like me on Facebook and work a good Facebook program, then go see God. On awakening, look at Facebook. No, it's on awakening. And the reason why my book tells a guy like me on awakening, because if I wait a little while, I will take over my day. And we're all going to regret it. So on awakening keeps me away from me. But I got into this thing where I was becoming frustrated, and I hit the desert, wondering when is something going to click. And what I'm here to tell you is that we pray and we meditate because in doing we succeed. Not trying to create anything, but just simply going to God because it's God. Simply going to God because He's the only power that's going to keep me sober. Because I'm not dependent upon my meetings or people, human power, to keep me sober. And something happens, there's a pruning that goes on if I forge ahead through that so-called desert. And many of us will get that. Am I willing to walk barefoot over rocks and hot sand to get to where I have to go? A lot of us will just recoil and go back to creating these little things, go back to my chimes and my bells, and believe in God speaking to only me, not you, because I'm a special AA. And it becomes empty. Because deep down inside, I'm still running scared. Deep down inside, I know I'm not connecting. And deep down inside, I know the ego is a lie. I'm traveling to Sweden to do one of these things with Marion. A couple of years ago. Now, we both have a prayer life and we both have a meditative life. And in that, sometimes questions are answered. And sometimes questions are answered later on. Sometimes God will send in the troops to give you the God wink to know, I got your back. But I need to be awake enough to hear them, awake enough to see them. Yes? So I'm in Newark Airport, and if anyone's traveled to Newark Airport, you know that's not the training ground for spiritual growth. Newcomers, don't go to Newark. And so we leave Fort Lauderdale, we have a stopover in Newark, over to Sweden, and we're in Newark, and we can't find our terminal, and anyone we ask, Newark Airport, what are you bothering me for? And so I don't know what to do. We're in this terminal walking back and forth, and Marion says, I don't want to go, I'm afraid. And I'm thinking, why am I going? What am I going to Sweden for? I have a 9-hour flight over the Atlantic Ocean, or one of those oceans. They can probably get anyone to speak. Why am I doing this for? This is crazy. The airport, the air conditioner was broke. It's hot. I can't find my gate. I'm hungry. I got a 9-hour flight. Why am I doing this for 4 days to come back again? This is crazy. No, I don't want to go. And both of us had our minds working overtime. But we have belief in another power called God, which is greater than the mind. And only because we've been in the trenches, chopping wood and carrying water, praying and meditating day after day, twice a day, 3 times a day, and doing all of those things, that the ground was fertile. And so what we do, Marion comes over to me and says, let's pray. So we're standing in the middle of Newark Terminal, wherever the terminal was. We held hands, we closed our eyes, and we began to pray. Not very popular in Newark Airport. And when we opened our eyes, there was a woman standing just a few feet from us, smiling, and she came over and she says, "It's so wonderful to see people praying publicly." And we began to talk. And she had family in Al-Anon. She knew about AA. And she was going back to Sweden because her dad was terminally ill. And we got to talking, and she knew what we were doing, and she says, "Do you mind if I ask what you were praying?" And Marion told her, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." That's what her prayer, the mantra. And this woman kind of like got this look on her face of God was now in this conversation. And she told us, "I got to tell you, I have this bangle on my nightstand that's been sitting there forever. And when I was getting dressed this morning, something told me to put it on. I don't know why, but I always listen to God, and I put it on. I don't know why till this very moment. And I want you to have it." And what was written inside the bangle was, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." With that, Mary and I are like, "Let's go to Sweden." We were just joyful and happy, and it was just like this whole how dark it was before the dawn. I got a new pair of glasses. And we both knew who orchestrated the whole thing. Well, we all agreed to talk. Once we get on a plane and you can kind of move around, let's continue to hang out, because we really hit it off with this person. So we hit the 10,000 feet thing, the bell goes off, and Marion says, "I'm going to go find her." And Marion's gone about 3 days, and she comes back and she says, "I can't find her." I said, "Maybe she's in the ladies' room." Marion tries again. Now, Mary's alcoholic, so Mary's now looking in overhead compartments for this woman. Underneath people's seats. She gave us the seat number. She was not there. She was not on this plane. This is a true story. So we the plane. We were one of the first people to get off the plane. We're standing right at the gangplank. We're watching everyone come off. This woman never got off the plane. Now, there are a lot of explanations to this that science would probably come up with. But there's another one that science couldn't come up with. And if you've been around here a little while, and you have a life of prayer and have a life of meditation, you know about God sending these little angels out. Just to let you know, I got you. Keep doing. I'm the one who said, see, I thought a committee invited me to Sweden. Well, they were the warriors. God invited me to Sweden. And God's going to make sure that gets done. So he sent someone down. These two knuckleheads are not looking to go, "Would you please tell them to get on the plane?" And send this woman to convince them. Again, my God's from Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. That's how we talk. What if we weren't awake? What if we didn't believe in this process? What if we didn't have an 11-step prayer meditative life? What if we weren't cleaning up the wreckage of our past as we go through the day? What if we weren't accountable to a sponsor? What if we didn't believe in this power called God? You know what would have happened? We wouldn't have prayed. We would have come home and missed this godly moment, the God wink. And then come into an AA meeting giving you lots of excuses why I didn't go to Sweden, because I'm totally sound asleep, believing I'm awake in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm not. I'm completely removed from God. I'm completely removed from you. And I'm just going through the motions. But God has given me something that I don't have, and that is called endurance to do this work. Endurance to keep moving forward. And I want to turn this over to Chris real quick. I just want to read this. It says, in step 10, it's easy to let up on a spiritual program of action and rest on my laurels, my accomplishments of yesterday. I'm headed for trouble if I do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. Sly, clever, devious, and difficult to detect. And my personal enemy, that's what I'm up against. So I developed this prayer life, this meditative life, lots of inspirational books that I work with, they don't read. I tear them apart, I turn statements into questions, I sit with the considerations, I take pieces of the books into meditation so they become who I be, the way the big book becomes who we be. We don't have to remember because we're living it. And one of the greatest gifts I've gotten is knowing that I'm known by my Creator. God has given me a handful of these experiences through meditation, right through meditation where He speaks to us. The last thing, when we pray and we're in prayer, we have an interior prayer life. Everything's about prayer. We will get, as I have gotten, answers I don't want to hear. Get out of the relationship. Leave the job. You're making too much money. These are things I don't want to hear. And I don't want to go too far into prayer because God just might give me an answer like that. And it may even come from my sponsor. I just want to cover my bases, quick in, get out, check in with God like he's Holiday Inn, and off I go. And run the world the way I see fit to control. I talk to God in my car. I talk to God all day long. But I don't pray in my car while I'm driving to work. It's a conversation I'm having with God as I'm driving. Prayer is an intimate moment of communing with God where there's no distractions. And for me, I'm on my knees like a servant ready to go to work. Because I know, based on my track record and my brokenness, during the day, I'm really going to need God. And it might be a hiccup and it might be a valley. I pause when agitated or doubtful, and I ask God for the right thought or answer. What do I do here? Do I clean this up? What do I do? And if I'm clear, I can hear. God got me sober to be of service to others. I work for God. So I need to seek out the employer and ask him, where are we going, boss? What are we going to do today? I'll turn it over to Chris.
Peter, thank you. My name is Chris. I am an alcoholic. I've known Peter a long time, and he's one of the most inspiring speakers you'll ever get a chance to hear. It's always a pleasure doing stuff with him. Steps 10 and 11. A huge shift happens in the first 9 steps. I mean, you go out there and you start making amends, and there's just a transformation of spirit that happens with that. And step 10 and 11 are so cool because they allow us to run with that and to get as deep and go in as deep as we want and get as close to God as we want. Anybody in here know what the mystics are in religious tradition? The mystics are the type of people who would go up onto the mountains of the Himalayas and pray in caves for 5 years, or they go on silent retreats for 6, 8, 10 years. I mean, these are people who have a desperate desire to know the will of God. Just to really go in. I mean, forsaking everything else, just going in. Those are the mystics. And our religious traditions are filled with examples. And there's many written works that are incredible to read that's in our historical tradition. Here's what I think alcoholics are. I truly believe this. I believe we are unresolved mystics. I think somewhere deep inside there's a desperate need for us to have a connection to God. I know it's certainly that way in my experience. Even when I was drinking and even when I was using, I swear there was something in me that was drawing me in a spiritual direction. It was a bizarre spiritual direction. It was like Carlos Castaneda or stuff like that. But there was a hunger. There was a hunger in my soul for that connection. And I have to show up in Alcoholics Anonymous and get exposed to the steps to find a holistic way, a way that I can actually, develop this God consciousness. The consciousness of the presence of God, this amazing thing that I think alcohol and drugs, in a way, were a part of that. I sought desperately to feel that connection. So here I am in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm exposed to the book, the big book, and I'm reading this stuff. And it's very, very simple instructions. These instructions were basically laid out for people that were not in very good shape back in the day. And there's something that really any of us can follow. One of the things I think that's necessary to move into these steps is to be able to lay aside prejudice against spiritual terms or even organized religion. to be able to lay aside some of these belief systems that we've developed. I had a lot of them. You know, my first month or so in AA, you know, I got the memo, you know, that we're praying, we're doing the Serenity Prayer and the Lord's Prayer, and, you know, this is about God and everything. And you know, my concept of that particular time with God was that I had suffered an incredible amount, like in the previous 10 years. I'd lost a lot, and, you know, you want to talk about bad breaks and misunderstandings, and I'm thinking, if there is a God, if there's an all-powerful God, you know, he certainly didn't protect me from this enormous debacle that's my life. This God has got to be like a cosmic Alan Funt or something. You know what I mean? Like just up there laughing at, you know, hey, look at the Schroeder kid. Watch him do 2 Quaaludes and go to the police station and ask for directions. You know, just because I was always in these incredible debacles, you know. Those were my belief systems, you know, and I needed to be able, you know, Peter said this is about letting go and this is about discarding, and it's absolutely true, because the things that were going to block me off from this spiritual experience were the things that I knew, the things I was sure about, and I had to become willing to set those things aside. You know, how important is this step work? I'm just going to read a couple of things. This is an interesting one, and it's one of my favorites. It's actually kind of hidden in Tradition 9 in the 12 and 12. And it says this: unless each AA member follows to the best of their ability our suggested 12 steps to recovery, they almost certainly sign their own death warrant. Wow. You think he means death warrant? You know, that's pretty strong language. This is something that Bill wrote. If we don't attempt this step work and we really are alcoholic, we may not get into or be able to stay in the sunlight of the Spirit, which is offering us this daily reprieve. And then it says, their drunkenness and disillusion are not problems inflicted by people in authority. They result from their personal disobedience to spiritual principles. So why do we relapse? Why do we go back out? Why do we fade away? You know, why do we stop going to meetings, stop working with other people, last a certain amount of time, and all of a sudden there's a drink in our hand? I believe it's because of our personal disobedience to these spiritual principles. I want to read another thing here because I think it has a lot to do with step 10 and certainly step 11. And it's from the foreword to the 12 and 12. It says, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. It's certainly been my case. I'm happily and usefully whole today, and you really could not say that knowing me in the late 80s. I was no vision for you in the late 80s, I can tell you that much. So step 10. I believe step 10 is a reactive step. I think we practice this step in real time, and where it's available and it's appropriate, we use the tools that we've learned in all of the other steps. If we own an amends, we make an amends. If something disturbs us, we inventory it and talk about it with someone else. It gives us a reactive way. It was a very formal process going through steps 1 through 9. I think the 10th step, though you could say it's formal, is more reactive, and it can be done in real time, and it can be done quickly. I don't practice any of this stuff perfectly. You know, I stand before all of you tonight with an awakened spirit. Do not confuse that with someone that's perfect. You know, there's enormous things that are that are very imperfect about me. But when I choose, or when I'm inspired to do 10 steps reactively, 99.9% of the time, I get a really, really good result. I think the longer you're sober, the more painful expressions of blatant character defects are for us. Like when I walked in here, I was just lying and yelling and judging. I was just an absolute mess. And I was able to survive that. I'm much more sensitive to these character defects today. If I'm not truthful with someone, even just a little bit, it's really gonna bother me. So I've found through experience, it's in my own best interest, it's in my own personal best interest to make a quick amends, to straighten something out, to inventory something if it's really eating my lunch, to share it with someone else. And the 10th step has become a working piece of business in my life. The 11th step, absolutely love the 11th step. The 11th step is broad, roomy, all-inclusive. Yes, there's instructions. Upon awakening, as we move through the day, when we retire at night, you really want to put some horsepower in your program. Just take one of those and do exactly what it says in the book for a period of 30 days or something. This stuff is absolutely transformative. And I do upon awakening, and I do the evening review. And as I move through the day, I use the disciplines of step 11, the disciplines of step 10, and it improves my ability to deal. And honest to God, it improves my ability to be comfortable. I'm not saying being comfortable is a brass ring. Sometimes it's overrated. Some of the work in Alcoholics Anonymous, absolutely, there's going to be times when you're uncomfortable. But when I practice these recovery principles as a discipline, things really go pretty smoothly. There's a suggestion in here that there are some really good books that you can explore. There's been spiritual masters, for thousands and thousands of years, and a lot of times there's very, very powerful literary works that are worthwhile for us to study. And one of the things, I was always a big reader. I was a blackout drinker, so I only had to read the one book. But I was always a reader. And so when I got sober and I started to feel that spiritual tug, I started to go to the bookstores and look in the religion and philosophy sections. And this isn't for everyone, but there was an enormous period. There was a period of time of about 20 years where I always had 3 or 4 spiritual books open. And what I was drawn most toward, I love the Eastern religions. There's practically nothing that isn't interesting to me if it's spiritual. But where I was drawn, I was drawn very, very strongly toward the stuff that revolves around first century Christianity. Now, it's kind of funny. Alcoholics Anonymous came from the Oxford group. And the Oxford group were a group of people who believed that if they practiced the principles of first century Christianity, it would be for a better and more devout life. And that's where Dr. Bob and that's where Bill Wilson ended up when they were trying to solve their problem. Now, Bill Wilson came early, stayed late, and asked if there was anything else he could do, and he stayed sober. Dr. Bob came late, left early, and didn't want to get involved, and he didn't. He was going to the Asha group for about 3 or 4 years and did not get sober. So you look at the different, anybody sponsor people? You know, there's the same kind of pattern there, you know, when we come into Alcoholics Anonymous. But I started to really study the works of a lot of historians and a lot of theologians that talked about first century Christianity. I find a lot of comfort in it. You know, I'm not trying to be religious up here. I just I found food for my spirit in these works. Now, you know, I'll tell you what. My life was so small when I was out there drinking. I'll give you a piece of the last 2 or 3 years of my life. What a day would look like. Okay. I would come to in the morning wearing the clothes that I'd passed out in the night before. The vodka or the bourbon would just be pouring out of my pores. I would stink like a bar rag. And I'd stagger into the bathroom, you know, do some vomiting calisthenics, throw some water on my face, and I'd go out to my $50 car and drive off to my bad job. And you know, and it was just like torture, just getting through the day. I'd be like, oh! And finally quitting time would come, and I'd speed to the liquor store. I'd buy some more vodka, I'd buy some more bourbon, and I would get back home and I'd crack it open and I would start drinking. And let's say I'd get home about 4:30 or so. I'd be drunk by 5:30. I'd be in a blackout by 6:30, and I'd be passed out by 7:30. Then I'd come to in the middle of the night, you know, to stagger into the bathroom. I mean, that is a small life. That is a small life. I mean, I couldn't get out of my own way. There was no quality in my life, and there were no people left in my life, and it was just a sad existence. You know, today it's completely different. In this book, it talks about, you know, we pack what we can into the stream of life. When I first saw that promise, I thought, like, well, I don't want to pack a lot of stuff into the stream of life. You know, I want to have some alone time, and I want to be able to watch TV. Listen, what happens is, you know, God moves us when we become disciplined about this stuff, and we become compliant with this step work. Really what happens is our lives become none of our business. They become more about God's business and you know, being helpful. Today, what my life is like is I have a pretty big job where, you know, I've got a lot of responsibility. A lot of people report to me. You know, big budget. I've got an AA community. Like I swear to God, I came in here tonight and I saw about 8 people who were old home group members of mine in Burnsville, New Jersey. It's very difficult for me to go anywhere without knowing somebody. So there's an absolute ton of people in my life. I'm involved in community affairs. For some crazy reason, I got roped into communities in crisis, and I'm running around, you know, trying to do what I can to combat the opiate epidemic. I'm an alcoholic, you know. It's not like I didn't use opiates every once in a while. I wasn't crazy, but listen, you know, folks, the opiate epidemic is just unbelievably impactful today. We're losing 200 people a day to this. So I'm trying to do that. I do a lot of traveling. I'm a family member now. Today, I'm a go-to guy in my family. I get the call when there's a problem or something needs to be worked out. I got to tell you, nobody was calling me back in the 80s, you know. They didn't say, oh, well, we've got a problem here, let's call Chris. That was not happening. It was not happening. I would make it about me. Alcoholics are beautiful. Half the sentences end with "on me." Like, some bitch died on me. Now I got to go to the funeral and everything, get dressed up. I mean, we make everything about us because of this toxic self-centeredness. The more I look at my life, the more I have to give credit to God. I'm not a stupid person, but I had an utter inability on my own to make progress in my life. I knew I needed it. I couldn't pull it off. I knew I could do better. I never did. You know what I mean? It's just on my own. I lack the power, the transformational power to be able to affect positive change in my life. And I show up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's offered there. Folks, if AA was only about not drinking, I would come, because my drinking was going to kill me. But it's about so much more than that. It's about, they call it, they say in the book, we were reborn. And I understand it. I understand that today. I understand how impactful the promises are. And truly, I'm living a life today that is reborn. On the flip side of that, I also believe that our recovery and our sobriety is very fragile. I've seen many, many good people fall short in certain disciplines within Alcoholics Anonymous. And over the course of time, change. Like recovery, a lot of times happens slowly over the course of time. I didn't change overnight. It's taken decades for me to be the way I am today. So it was incremental, and it changed over time. And I'm not able to recognize necessarily the improvements in my life unless I'm looking back. I think the same thing can happen to us when we head in the other direction and we fall short on our spiritual program and we rest on our laurels. I see it happen, almost every day in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's less action. There's less step work. There's less meetings. There's less sponsees. And over the course of time, you can go backwards and have a drink in your hand. I've seen that happen to some really good people. So I think the answer to that is, it says in this particular step, it says we let God discipline us. We let God discipline us with these simple instructions. And I look at steps 10 and I look at steps 11 as disciplines. They're not just something I do when I want to do it. There's something I do before I leave the house. There's something I do before I go to sleep. It's something that, I do not miss. And if I do miss it because some crazy thing is going on in my life, I have an anxiousness about getting it done. So I know that's really important. Prayer and meditation are not something I would have recognized early on as having the ability to impact my life that they actually do. It's happened over the course of time. It's become deeper and deeper. I can honestly say that I pray and meditate more this year than I did last. And I prayed and meditated more last year than I did the year before. I believe that over any considerable period of time, alcoholism gets worse. It doesn't get better. So I personally believe that I must become more disciplined every year, not less. Because if it's true that alcoholism gets worse over any considerable period of time, I'm going to need more spiritual participation. I'm going to need to be obeying these spiritual principles as much as I possibly can. I have the opportunity just recently that I'm working with a new guy. And there was a period of time where most of my sponsees were people that had been around a while, but I got a chance to work with a brand new guy about 2 or 3 months ago, and it was so good for me to do that because it brought me back to the way that I used to think. I used to think that my problems were my problem. You know what I mean? Like, I could name 3 or 4 or 5 problems, and those are my problems, and I got to concentrate on those, and I got to fix those. More and more I believe that I don't have problems. If I have problems, the real problem is that I see that situation as a problem. You know what I'm saying? So it's always in my perspective. It's always in the way that I look at these things, and that's changed so much. And I see it when I'm working with this new guy. He's breaking up with his girlfriend. He's got problems at work. And those are just all over him. They're just crippling him, these problems. And I'm thinking, I got a lot of the exact same things this guy has, but they're not bothering me at all. Somehow I'm like sidestepping the suffering. I'm still out there in the real world doing real stuff and things are happening, but I don't see them as problems that I'm going to become preoccupied with and suffer. It's just something that's come. I think it's part of the spiritual awakening. One of the things that I've gotten really involved with lately, just because I'm seeing life like Peter was saying with a different pair of glasses. I'm clear enough today to really see the wonder of life. One of the things that I'm paying a lot of attention to is the movement forward with astronomical research. Since the advent of the Hubble telescope and some other stuff, oh my God, the universe has just become so much more dense and so observable. Until we had the Hubble telescope. Here's a quick story for you. When they sent the Hubble telescope up, the lens had to be ground to within a millionth of an inch for it to work. It was such a big lens, and it just had to be perfect. And they sent it up there, and they turned it on, and the pictures were blurry. The pictures were blurry, and they're like, "Oh crap!" And they go back and they start looking, and they find the miscalculation in the grinding of the lens. And they go, "Oh, this is what we did wrong." Now, I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in Boulder, Colorado, about 2 years ago, and I get introduced to the guy that fixed the problem. He goes, I can make a contact lens for that. And I met the guy who made the contact lens for the Hubble telescope. It was a very, very cool thing. But picture this, the alcoholic really thinks that they're the center of the universe and everything revolves around them, and it's very, very difficult to see the enormity of God's wonderful universe. An experiment that they did with the Hubble was this. They scientifically found the darkest piece of sky that was out there. It was absolutely black, and they focused the Hubble telescope on it. It'd be like a dime against that back wall. That's what the aperture would have been like. And they focused on it, and they found over 20,000 galaxies in the darkest part of the sky. Now, I might be the only person in here who's like blown away by that, but you know, I got to tell you, I'm certainly not the center of the universe. I can say that, and I, you know, the science. I love science, and I don't see anything in science that interferes at all with my spiritual beliefs. I believe that 13.6 billion years ago, there was a Big Bang, and that created the universe. And guess what that Big Bang was? You know, let there be light. Let there be light. And let there be light in your lives as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Pete. We are going to actually take a break. We don't start our final speaker. Pete's going to cover step 12, A Vision for You, at 8:30. We have some hot dogs we'll put out there. If you want to go grab something quick to eat, if you've been here all day, it's been a long day, hang with us. The finality's coming. We're almost there. Thanks for coming.